Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto wolf mask in Konoha and has a fox part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Konohagakure. October 10th. Night of the Kyuubi attack. It was an average day in Konohagakure. Well, so long as the average is hundreds of ninja dying fighting a 900 feet tall 9-tailed demon fox that has an inexhaustible chakra supply and is able to heal any wound it receives, and if that is your idea of average, either you are very bloodthirsty or the unluckiest person to be alive. This isn't good, thought one lone figure as he stared at the carnage from the top of a hill. If this keeps up, Konoha will be no more. He stood at 5 feet 10 inches, with black hair and a wolf tail, glacier blue eyes, and having a martial artist build. He was wearing a black leather jacket with white trim and a hood, gray pants, shirt, and flak vest, black combat boots, gloves, and a mask that covers the lower portion of his face from his neck to his nose like Kakashi's. Attached to his back was a sword, with a carved wood handle with vine plant designs carved into the handle. He stared at the slaughter that was happening between the shinobi of the leaf and the Kyuubi no Kitsune. You planning on helping them out? Said a voice in his head. Size, might as well. But I don't understand, isn't the Kyuubi supposed to be their guardian? What or who is making her do this? He asked with a puzzled look. Only one way to find out, the voice began. Is go straight to the horse's mouth, he finished, and with that, he shunshined in a blizzard of snow to the hidden village. Hokage office. Minato Namikaze, Yondaime Hokage of Konoha, aka Konoha's Yellow Flash, was having a bad day. Not only was the Kyuubi attacking them, but his wife Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, who is pregnant with his first child, is now in labor. And the only way to stop it was to seal it in a newborn child, which in this case, his own. He stared at the forbidden scroll which showed the seal to do it. But there was a catch, a fatal one at that. He'd have to sacrifice his life to seal the fox, and his son would be ostracized by the village despite his wish to see him as a hero, such as a Jinchuriki's life is. Damn it. Why did this have to happen now of all times? He thought as he banged his head on his desk. It was then he got an unexpected visitor. I hope I'm not interrupting anything, said an unknown voice, and Minato turned his head to the source and saw a man standing in the window. He immediately went on guard. Who are you? He demanded in a cold tone. The stranger put his hands up in defense. Whoa, easy there Hokage-sama. I was just passing through and I saw the little show outside, he replied as he pointed his thumb outside the window. As for who I am. The name Sanada, Magoaki Sanada, formerly of Yuki no Kuni. Minato quirked an eyebrow at that. You're a long way from home. Magoaki just sighed at that. Well, I have my reasons. One of which is that the late daimyo's little piece of shit brother is a tyrant. Then he noticed the scroll with the Shiki Fujin. He hopped off the open window and walked toward the desk and began studying the seal, including the hand signs to how to do it. Minato looked at the stranger warily as he looked at the seal. It was then the doors to the office door burst open to reveal a man with long spiky white hair, a red jacket, a large scroll on his back. Minato, you need to. Who's this? Jiraiya of the legendary Sannin asked Minato, when he saw the unknown shinobi in the office. Not enough time for that, Jiraiya-sensei. What is it? Minato asked his sensei from his days as a genin. Right, the Kyuubi is getting closer. Shiori, the Okamikage, and the other shinobi can't hold it for long. You better have a solution, now. I have one, Minato confirmed with a nod, the Shiki Fujin. Jiraiya stared at his pupil incredulously for a second. Are you with me, Minato? Jiraiya roared, you better not be planning on using it yourself. At the very least I should be doing it. You have a kid and wife. I know that, Jiraiya, Minato retorted, but as the cage of this village it's my responsibility, and when I seal it into my child. Are you crazy? Jiraiya interrupted. You, me, and Kushina all know how Jinchurikis are treated. You saw so yourself with Iwa's Jinchuriki. That is why I am going to request that he is to be treated as a hero. Minato said with conviction, they will listen to me. No, they won't, Magoaki denied from where he was still studying the Shiki Fujin, startling the pair who had briefly forgotten about him. The Yukikage asked the same thing for the Jinchuriki of the wolf spirit, but they hated him all the same. Jiraiya lifted an eyebrow at that. How would you know that? Who are you? And what do you mean wolf spirit? He asked, and Magoaki just sighed. Because I'm the Jinchuriki. I contain the Hokubu Hakioku Ukami no Seishin, Northern Arctic wolf spirit, of Yuki no Kuni, he said sadly, and the two Konoha nin's eyes just widened at that. Huuuuh. They both yelled in unison. Magoaki merely sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. Unfortunately, there is no time for me to explain. So I am just going to say this: my ceiling does not like yours, he explained. Once every generation there will always be a Jinchuriki of the Hokubu Hakioku Ukami no Seishin. He is always sealed in by a set of very specific seals and is in a kinda symbiotic relationship with the host, and while most hosts die within a month or so after the transfer, it is said to be rather painful for the current host. They both winced at what he was saying. Ouch. Jiraiya said, and Magoaki nodded at that. He was lucky he didn't go through what his predecessors went through. Minato, although curious of how he know about such, knew there wasn't time, but then a shinobi came through the doors wearing a ninja mask and his hitai slanted over his left eye. He was Kakashi Hatake, one of Minato's students, and Jonin of Konoha. Sensei, he shouted desperately, the Kyuubi has reached the outskirts of Konoha. Damn it. Minato cursed loudly, I thought we had more time. And also, Sensei, your son Naruto was just born, but what? What's wrong, Kakashi? Is it Kushina? Answer me. Kakashi flinched at his sensei's tone as he answered. The medic nins say she doesn't have long to live, the labor took its toll on her, she'll probably have at least 6 hours to live, he said as he had sad look in his visible eye. Minato's eyes widened at the news his student just gave him as he fell to his knees. No. No. Please tell me it's not true. He begged to the heavens as Kakashi and Jiraiya lowered their heads in sadness. But then Magoaki said something that will allay their fears, but also shock them. I can save her. Minato and the others perked at Magoaki's words. I know a little trick the wolf taught me while I was in Yuki no Kuni. I've not used it though because the human wielder sacrifices a huge chunk their life force. What? Minato asked hopefully, but why would you? Magoaki shrugged. I may not look it, but I am well into my 70s, he announced, shocking the room's occupants, and I know the pain of growing up alone. I will need a child no older than 10 months of age though, any older and the transfer of the wolf spirit will not work. Minato was taking this in as he thought about it. Alright, but we need to do something about the Kyuubi and seal it into my son. Magoaki nodded at that. That's fine, but I suggest you use this seal instead along with the other seals, except the one that kills you plan to use. It'll leave you weakened for a while, but you'll live. Magoaki reached into his trench coat and produced a scroll and handed it to Minato. Arigato, but may I ask one thing? Minato asked, and the former Yuki nin looked at him and gestured him to continue. Exactly how long will you have after you sacrificed a good of your life force? Magoaki scrunched his face in thought at that. From what the wolf told me, I will have only 5 months to live until I can a new host find for him. So you better find a child before then. Minato nodded. I'll do everything I can to. He agreed. Come, I'll lead you to the hospital. Konoha Hospital. The hospital of Konohagakure was currently embroiled in chaos as medics, doctors and nurses rushed through the building desperately trying to heal the wounded that streamed in during the Kyuubi attack, and in one part of the hospital a beautiful red-headed, amethyst-eyed woman holding a whiskered blonde-haired blue-eyed baby murmuring sweet words to her child as tears streamed down her face. Kami, why must you be so cruel? The woman asked sadly. To take me from my child so soon. Kushina, called a voice she knew that made her heart scream for joy. Minato-kun. She responded with happiness, but also had a hint of sadness. as the man she loved moved from the hallway into her bedside. I heard what the doctor said. Minato whispered quietly as he rested his forehead against hers, blinking away his tears at her weakened condition. I'm sorry, Minato-kun, I won't be able to be with you and Naruto-chan. Kushina sobbed as her husband embraced her. Eyes all right, Kushina-chan, he said encouragingly, there is someone here who can help you. Kushina's eyes widened in shock and hope at hearing what her husband said. What? Who, Minato-kun? It can't be Tsunade-sensei. She's not here, she asked, but before Minato could answer, another voice she didn't recognize spoke up. That would be me, Kushina-sama. She looked behind her husband, and standing by the doorway was a man with black shoulder blade length hair in a wolf tail, glacier blue eyes, standing at a height of 5 feet 10 inches tall, wearing a black leather jacket with white trim and a hood, gray pants, shirt, and flak vest, similar to a Konoha Jonin's but gray-black combat boots, gloves with metal plates on the back, and a mask that covers the lower portion of his face from his neck to his nose. Attached to his back was a sword, with a carved wood handle with gold vine plant designs carved into the handle. She could tell he was a shinobi just by looking at how he carried himself. Who are you? She asked with a hint of concern. My name is Magoaki, he said, introducing himself with a respectful bow. I am the Jinchuriki of the Hokubu Hakioku Ukami no Seishin who taught me a technique I can use to heal your body. But, why? She asked, confused. What do you stand to gain? Nothing, Magoaki replied, shaking his head slightly with a slight smirk. I gain nothing from this other than ensuring that the Hokubu Hakioku Ukami no Seishin has a new container before I die. Kushina's eyes widen at that, and she can tell by the look in his eyes that he wasn't kidding. But why? Why do you want to sacrifice your life for me? She asked, and Magoaki's eyes gained a sad look to them. Let's just say, I'm tired of wandering around the world alone, and wish to be reunited my parents. Also, I'm helping a member of my mother's clan seek happiness, he confessed, and Minato and Kushina's eyes widen in shock at that. Minato was the first to recover. Why, you mean, you're a... Minato stammered, and Magoaki just smiled. You guessed right, Minato-san. I'm Uzumaki on my mother's side. I inherited my father's hair and eyes, while I inherited my mother's face and antics, he said, and laughed at the shocked expressions. I'm always told that the Uzumaki are pranksters at heart, Magoaki said as he chuckled. I'm glad to have met at least one other Uzumaki. When I heard about the destruction of Uzushiogakure, I feared that we were a dying breed. Kushina smiled at her now realized cousin. So am I. She whispered, fresh tears in her eyes. Wish I could have gotten to know you before though. Magoaki nodded in agreement. Just make sure this little guy learns about his uncle, though, will ya? He asked, smiling, as well as softly patting Naruto's head. Kushina smiled sadly, as she nodded. I will. Magoaki just smiled at that. Out in the hallway, Jiraiya heard the whole exchange between Kushina and her long-lost cousin, and had a small smile on his face. He heard Magoaki sigh as he turned to Minato. You better hurry, Minato, and if anything happens to my nephew, regardless of my condition for the last few months of my life, his body was then surrounded by a dark aura, as his voice took a demonic tone, I'll kill you. Minato nervously sweat dropped as he nodded his head before taking his son out of Kushina's arms and then kissing his red whirlpool, telling her that he would be back, and then flashing out of the hospital thinking, Jesus, is it an Uzumaki thing to be so scary? He mentally wondered, vastly preferring to fight the Kyuubi than piss of his wife or another Uzumaki. Back in the hospital room, Magoaki breathed deeply as he prepared himself for what he was about to do. Thanks for teaching me this technique, Fubukatsume Dono, he thought as he began the series of hand seals to save his cousin. He could hear the wolf sigh regretfully from within the seal. Thank you for being a good friend, Magoaki. The wolf thanked, smiling as Magoaki completed the final hand seal, and I wish you luck wherever it is you go, old friend. Magoaki smiled under his mask at that. Likewise, hairball. Hey! Shouted Fubukatsume as Magoaki called out the name of the jutsu. Kinjutsu. Seisei no Maikon. Forbidden technique. Rebirth of life, he shouted as a bright white light filled the room, blinding any who saw it temporarily. Outskirts of Konoha. The Konoha nin were barely holding by their fingernails, and when the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze, came on his trusted toad summon Gamabunta, the shinobi all cheered at the arrival of their leader. Shiori Ukamikas, head of the Ukamikas clan, and commander-in-chief of the Ukamikage Black Ops, jumped on the toad boss's head to speak to her old friend. She was dressed in the black battle armor of her unit, which consisted of a form samurai-style beast plate, black anbu pants, anbu sandals, arm guards, and fingerless black gloves with metal blacks on the back. She had jet black hair in a high ponytail, brown-yellow eyes, and a figure that any woman could kill for. "You're late, Minato," Shiori shouted at him as she panted for breath. Minato chuckled weakly as he shifted Naruto slightly in his arms. "Sorry about that, had an unexpected, but good, visitor." He explained, "Shiori, I'm going to seal the Kyuubi, I'll be extremely weak afterwards, you are the temporary Hokage until I recover." Shiori was confused by that, but she was also shocked that he chose her to be temporary Hokage. Before she could comment though, a soft cry caught her attention as she looked at the bundle in his arms. "Minato, is that your child?" she asked. She knew Kushina was pregnant with Minato's child, because she was one of the guests at their secret wedding because Minato trusts her. Minato grinned proudly as he showed Naruto to her, and Shiori couldn't help but smile at how cute the young Namikaze looked. "Indeed it is, Shiori," Minato said. Then the Kyuubi's roar, which sounded like a mournful roar, caught their attention. "We've all been fighting hard, Minato. Shiori, your plan better work, 'cause if it doesn't." "I know," Minato confirmed. "Have everyone fall back, I don't want anyone to get caught up in this." Shiori nodded and leapt off Gamabunta, shouting orders to fall back and let the Yondaime handle it. Squaring off against the Kyuubi, Minato couldn't help but smile down at his son. "Naruto, I hope that when you learn of the burden you are about to bear, you can forgive your old man for doing this." "Let's go, Gamabunta. Way ahead of you, Gaki," said the boss toad with a giant leap, and Minato began the hand signs as Gamabunta held the Kyuubi at bay. "Keep that fuzzball busy as long as you can," Minato shouted. The Kyuubi swiped a claw at Gamabunta, which scratched him near his eye. "Ah, that's gonna leave a mark. Hurry up." The moment the toad said that, Minato landed on the final seal and called the jutsu. Fuinjutsu. Okami no Rei Fuin. Sealing technique. Spirit seal of the wolf. A bright light erupted as everyone who had fallen back from the fight covered their eyes. When the light faded, the Kyuubi was gone and Gamabunta stood alone in the middle of the field nursing his wound. "Minato!" Shiori shouted, landing on top of Gamabunta, finding her friend unconscious while Naruto slept peacefully. "Thank God, are you alright, Gamabunta-sama?" "Nothing a couple of stitches won't fix," the boss toad assured. "I trust you can take of things from here." "Hi, Gamabunta-sama," Shiori assured, picking up Naruto as another Ukamikage Spec Ops picked up Minato. "Very well, tell the brat to get in contact with us once he's recovered." Gamabunta rumbled before disappearing in a cloud of smoke. Shiori sighed as she turned to her partner. "Come on, let's get these two to the hospital with Kushina-chan," she ordered, receiving a nod in acknowledgement. Konoha Hospital. Kushina looked sadly at the bed across the room that her cousin was on. He was pale, sweating, and had a coughing fit every now and then as the doctors and nurses tried to make him comfortable. "I finally get a member of my family back, only for him to sacrifice himself for me," she thought as tears leaked from her eyes. A sudden scuffle of movement brought her attention to the doorway as Shiori busted into the room with Naruto in her arms and another Ukamikage was carrying Minato. "Minato-kun," she shouted fearfully. "Don't worry, he's only sleeping," Shiori assured as she passed Naruto over to his mother. "The knucklehead wouldn't die even if the Shinigami told him to." Kushina let out a sound that was a mixture of a laugh and a sob as she held Naruto close to her. "Thank you, Shiori-chan," she whispered, smiling at her longtime friend who returned it with her own. "Hey now, you know better than that." The Ha no Roku Tenshi, 6 angels of the leaf, always look after their own. She said, and Kushina chuckled at that. She and her 5 friends, Sume Inuzuka, Yoshino Nara, Hitomi Hyuga, Makoto Uchiha, and of course Shiori Ukamikas formed a group with her as the leader when they became Chunin. They were known throughout the elemental countries in always succeeding in their missions by dealing heavy casualties to the enemy, and keeping allied forces' losses to a bare minimum. Thank God we're all alive, Kushina whispered, hugging her son and looking over to Minato, but it took a cousin I just met sacrificing himself for this to happen. Then don't let be in vain, girl. Shiori shouted. Kick and take names in his honor then. Kushina couldn't help but laugh at her friend's exuberant attitude. Thanks, Shiori-chan, you always helped cheer me up. She thanked as she leaned back against her pillow as exhaustion crept over her and her eyes started to close. Thank you, Kami, for letting me keep my family. And she fell asleep, with Naruto safely in her arms. Shiori smiled warmly at the scene. Taking a breath, she turned to her subordinate. Go and gather the clan heads, the Sandame, and the civilian council. She spat the last part like it was venom, and the Ukamikage Spec Op knew why. They, along with the Uchiha clan, with the exception of Makoto, have been mingling in affairs that they were not supposed to be, and thus, got on the nerves of the other clans. The Spec Op nodded in affirmation and left to carry out his orders. Well, it was quite a show, huh, Shiori? Shiori turned and saw Jiraiya enter the room with a not-so-happy smile on his face. I agree, Jiraiya-sama, we would have all perished if Minato hadn't come in time, Shiori said, and Jiraiya nodded at that. It was then the sound of terrible coughing caught their attention as they turned to Magoaki's bed. He was now starting to tremble as he used a pretty good amount of his life force to revitalize Kushina. Damn, cough, cough, cough. I never thought it would, cough, 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 be this bad, he said in a weak voice as Shiori and Jiraiya came over to his bed. I understand I have you to thank for saving my friend, Shiori said, looking down at the weakened man who nodded slightly. You have my deepest gratitude. Magoaki chuckled slightly before erupting into another fit of coughing. Did the ceiling work? He asked the 2 Konoha nin in a raspy voice and received a nod in confirmation. That's good to hear. The Spec Ops agent returned and nodded to Shiori, who nodded back and turned to Jiraiya. I'll need your help with the council. She informed. Fugaku and the civilians will probably try to pull something with Minato out of action. Jiraiya nodded at that as he knew they've been trying for years to gain control of things that are way out of their jurisdiction. I agree. I'll help you any way I can, he replied. Jiraiya-san, I have a request, Magoaki said in a hoarse voice. Jiraiya perked at that. What is it? He asked. I wish to entrust you with my journal, Magoaki informed, passing him a worn leather-bound book. Around 70 years of my accumulated knowledge, I hope you find it useful. Jiraiya nodded. I'll treat like men do, Ika, he informed, smirking at the smile that spread across Magoaki's lips. You rest, I'll take care of finding you a child you can use for the transfer. Magoaki nodded weakly as he fell back unconscious. Thank you, Jiraiya-san, he whispered as his eyes closed again. Jiraiya turned to Shiori with his hardened, battle face. Let's remind these peons who is in command here, shall we? He asked, making Shiori smirk ferally and nod in agreement before they vanished in a whirl of leaves. Hokage Tower, Council Room. The room was full of conversation as the shinobi elders, clan heads, the now retired Sandame, and the civilian council were murmuring on what was going on. I wonder what this meeting is about, whispered one civilian as he talked to his compatriot. It's probably about the situation with the Kyuubi, and how the Yondaime defeated it, said another, and before they could continue, Jiraiya and Shiori appeared in a swirl of leaves. Thank you for coming, Shiori said as she sat down in the Hokage's chair. What is this? You are not allowed to sit there. Fugaku shouted, infuriated. I am allowed because I am the interim Hokage while Minato recovers. Shiori snapped, glaring at Fugaku. Maybe if you and your clan were actually fighting instead of hiding like the cowards you are, you would know that. Fugaku and the civilian council's eyes widened at that, and Fugaku was now seething. He failed. That old geezer failed, thought Fugaku as he looked at Shiori, who was glaring at him, daring him to try something. Knowing a shouting match is about to erupt between the two, Hiruzen Sarutobi coughed to get their attention. If I may ask Shiori-chan, how is Minato-kun? The old Hokage asked, and Shiori stopped her glaring match with Fugaku and looked to her old superior. He's alive, but was weakened by the sealing of the Kyuubi. He's sleeping at the hospital right now. He named me as temporary Hokage until he recovers, she informed them. So let's get some things straight. We are incredibly weakened from this attack and we will be remaining under martial law until we have had a chance to repair in our situation. What, you can't do that? A civilian member shouted. What about trading in our food supplies? We have enough rations to last us for a year. Shiori remarked, taking in the civilian's roundness. Besides, it might do you some good to lose a couple of pounds. How dare you? You buy. Thunk. The civilian stood stock still as his cheek bled from the kunai that was now implanted in the wall. Shiori stood with her hand outstretched, glaring at the man, and unleashing a hell amount of ki on the fool as she spoke in a feral voice. I prefer you do not refer to me by that title, civilian. The civilians were scared shitless by the interim Hokage. What do you plan to do with the Jinchuriki that Minato created? Danzo asked, making Shiori and Jiraiya curse. What? The demon still lives. Another civilian shouted. This one was Abi Haruno, a pink-hair banshee as well as a massive fangirl of Minato and a certified idiot. We have to kill it while it's weak. In no way are you touching that child. Any of you touch him and I guarantee it will be a very public and very painful death for you. Shiori growled as ki poured out of her, causing everyone in the room to freeze. That so-called demon is the son of Minato and Kushina, not the Kyuubi. I don't care if it's their son, growled Fugaku, and I believe it should be either executed or turned into Aak. The Uchiha head never got to finish as he was grabbed by his throat and held in the air by a very pissed Jiraiya. If you so much as finish that statement, Fugaku, and I will send you to the Shinigami myself, growled Jiraiya as the man struggled to break free. Jiraiya, that's enough. He's learned his mistake, ordered the calm but furious Hiruzen as his student reluctantly let him go. Know this, Fugaku. The Toad Sanin growled as he unleashed ki on the Uchiha prick. If you go anywhere near Minato or any of his family, I will kill you. With that and a brief glare at Danzo for shooting his mouth off, Jiraiya returned to his spot beside Shiori. On to more pressing matters, Shiori declared, shutting out any more arguments. I will need all clan heads to report a list of their casualties and damage sustained from the attack. If I feel that the damage is not related to the attack or insignificant, I will not be funding the rebuilding for it or reimbursement. Same goes with any civilian home or establishment. You all seem to have forgotten that the seat I am sitting in is the ultimate power of this village, not you. Am I clear? The clans nodded in approval while the civilians nodded in fear of pissing off the irate acting Hokage even more. Before the meeting could be adjourned, Danzo, Hiruzen's rival and head of Root, decided to add something else. Before we adjourn this meeting, I like to present something that has gathered my attention, Danzo informed as Shiori, Jiraiya, and Hiruzen look at him warily. And what, pray tell, is that, Danzo? Shiori asked as her eyes narrowed at the Warhawk. What of the second Jinchuriki that had arrived in the village? He asked, nonplussed by the growls from Jiraiya and Shiori. One Magoaki Uzumaki, isn't it? None of your concern, Shiori declared, her hardened gaze daring someone to speak out. He was merely coming to visit Kushina, his cousin, and in the process saving her and the Yondaime's life when he used a forbidden technique that saved Kushina at the cost of his own life and also provided Minato with the seal he used for the Kyuubi. I remember him, Sarutobi declared, smiling fondly. I used to spar with him occasionally when I was younger. Actually, it was I who informed him of Kushina-chan's presence here in Konoha. The civilians and the other elders were shocked by this. Why didn't you tell us this, Hiruzen? Koharu demanded. That caused Hiruzen to glare back at his former teammate. I didn't, knowing you two and Danzo will try to do anything to make him a weapon for Konoha, like attempt to kidnap him and wipe his memories and make him your obedient slave. Hiruzen growled out, and I won't allow a old friend to suffer that kind of fate, he continued, and the elders and Danzo were now fuming at that. And now he's dying, Jiraiya in a somber tone, and he has at least 5 months to live until we find a new host for his tenant. I have a few suggestions in Min. Danzo began only to be cut off. I will not hand over a Jinchuriki to your sick root Danzo, Shiori snapped glaring at him. Continue this up and you will find yourself and your precious root in a very bad position. Danzo frowned but kept his mouth shut as a couple of other people recommended their children. If I may, my wife will be giving birth to our firstborn in a couple months, you may use her. Hiyashi suggested raising his hand. Shiori thought this over for a few moments and nodded in approval at the Hyuga head's request. Alright Hiyashi, but I suggest you update Hitomi on the situation and bring her to the hospital to meet Magoaki, she advised and Hiyashi nodded in understanding. Now, if that is all, then we are done. Me and Jiraiya are off to the hospital to inform Magoaki of the situation. With that the meeting ended. Mind if I come with you, Shiori-chan? I wish to catch up with my old friend before he passes on, Hiruzen requested as he followed Shiori and Jiraiya's example. The interim Hokage nodded and the trio vanished using a shunshin shortly followed by the remaining clan heads sans Fugaku as well as Danzo and the elders. This is ridiculous, they are letting not one but 2 demons live. Abby shouted infuriated, we have to do something about this. Calm down, Fugaku ordered harshly, the Uchiha plan is getting close to its final stage, just be patient and the demons will be dealt with when I and the Uchiha take our rightful place as the leaders of this village. Konoha Hospital. Is that you Hijiran? Magoaki asked smiling as he saw a familiar face enter the room. Yes it is old friend, Hijiran assured smiling as he took in his friend's condition, and I must say you look like shit. Magoaki laughed for a minute before coughing, you try transferring your life force to someone else and see how you feel. He countered making Hijiran chuckle, I'm glad to see you again before I pass on. And you Magoaki. Hijiran replied, we have found a potential child for you to use for the transfer, she will be born in a month, a member of the Hyuga clan. Magoaki smiled and nodded in relief, good, that means she will not grow up alone, he said gratefully, my sword, the Junsuina Yuki pure snow, pass it on to her will you, also I have another sword for my nephew, the Koken Okami, noble wolf. He lifted his hand up and channeled chakra into the seal that was on the palm of his hand and in a puff of smoke a double-edged straight-edged back katana sword appeared in his hand. Near the hilt of the sword was a single opening line that was a couple of millimeters thick and a couple of inches long, I hope he gets good use out of it. Shiori moved to the seat where Magoaki's possessions are and picked up the katana-like blade still in its sheath, while Hiruzen took the Koken Okami. I'll make sure they get them, you have my word, Hiruzen promised and Magoaki simled. Also, there's something else, he said as Hiruzen, Shiori, and Jiraiya moved forward. On the inside of my jacket are pockets for storage scrolls, and a few jutsu scrolls, since the girl will inherit my ability to use Hyoten because of the wolf. Hijiran chuckled. Swords, Hyoten, and the Byakugan, that will be quite the interesting mix don't you think? He asked smiling at his friend. No more interesting than Uber regeneration with extremely high Fuinjutsu skills and the Hyoten. Magoaki countered with a smile. It's funny Hijiran, I always wondered how I would die, if it would be from when that bastard of a daimyo in Yuki caught me and extracted the wolf spirit or if it would be in some glorious battle. Hijiran chuckled. Indeed, he agreed, it's very rare that a shinobi reaches our age these days. Magoaki nodded. I can only hope for a new age of peace where it isn't so odd for people like us to reach this age. He mused. Who knows, maybe it'll happen sooner than we think. Hiruzen then put a hand on his shoulder. Rest now, Hiyashi will be here with his wife tomorrow afternoon to meet with you, he said and Magoaki nodded in understanding. One more thing though, he says and Hiruzen leans in to listen, see if you can get that troublesome, drunk, bad sense of gambling, cousin of mine back here to see her family. Even if I have to drag her back by her hair, Hijiran promised, I'll make sure she returns. Thank you old friend. Magoaki whispered as he fell back unconscious, smiling. Hijiran sighed as he stood up and looked over to the other three occupants and smiled faintly. Well, I best send that letter off to Tsunade-chan if she is to return soon. He murmured to himself before quietly exiting the room. Well, that was amusing, don't you agree? Joked Kushina, who held Naruto in her arms, as she woke up a few minutes before Hiruzen and the others arrived and heard the whole thing. I'll say Kushina-chan, Shiori said with a grin, but before they could continue, a grunt came from the bed that Minato lay, as said was waking up. Ah, what hit me? Groaned the weakened Yondaime Hokage. That would be an SS-class Fuinjutsu technique, Kushina said smiling at her husband. I'm glad to see you awake, Minato-kun. Minato immediately sat up in his bed only to pathetically groan in pain as he collapsed. Glad to see you're alright, Kushina-chan. He said, waving his arm as Kushina giggled with a happy smile before a small cry caught her attention. Naruto-kun sends his greetings as well, Kushina translated, smiling at her husband, and the wish for food. Minato chuckled as he looked at his family, happy that they will be together. He turned his head to the bed next to him and a sad look came upon his face at Magoaki's condition. Sigh, I wish I got to know him more, he could have taught me a lot more Fuinjutsu, Minato said sadly as the other three nodded. At least it wasn't in vain, kiddo, Jiraiya said as he put a hand on his shoulder, he at least some stuff for your son and his successor. Minato raised an eyebrow at that. Who? Hiyashi volunteered for his daughter who is to be born sometime in late December, Shiori informed him, and Minato nodded at that. Shiori then looked at the jacket draped over the chair next to all of Magoaki's other possessions. Walking over, she picked up his jacket. He left her everything he owned, from his notes on Fuinjutsu to his scrolls on Hyoten, even a sword for her and Naruto. Minato looked down in regret as he paid his respects to the man that saved his family. Is there anything else we can do for him? Minato asked heavily. All he wanted was to see his other cousin, Tsunade. Jiraiya said with a slight smirk. Turns out his aunt was Mito-san's sister. Minato nodded at that. Tsunade was not only a member of the Senju but also a member of the Uzumaki clan as well. And also the best we can do for him is to make him as comfortable as much as possible, Minato said as he turned back to his wife and child, and smiled. Somewhere in Fire Country, walking along a road somewhere between Tanzakugai and Konoha, a rather buxom blonde-haired woman with honey-brown eyes looking to be in about her 30s walked along the road. Beside her a young woman with black hair and eyes wearing a black kimono and carrying a pig in her arms. I can't believe we're going back to Konoha. The young woman said excitedly, it's been so long. It has, hasn't it? The older woman stated nostalgically, looking up into the sky. Konoha, all that place represents to me is death. Still, Tsunade-sama, you seemed pretty shocked when you got that letter. What was in it? Asked Tsunade's companion and apprentice Shizune. A cousin of mine from the Uzumaki side of my family is dying, Tsunade explained sadly. He wanted to see me before he passed on. Shizune looked at her sensei with a look of understanding and a hint of sadness. What is his name, Tsunade-sama? Shizune asked, and the blonde smiled sadly at the memories of a young man with black hair tied in a wolf tail, and wearing a black jacket with a Hittite with 4 snowflakes on the metal plate as she gave her answer. Magoaki. Magoaki Uzumaki Sanada, she said, and they continued their way to Konoha. Konoha, the next day asterisk. In terms of damage, we got off pretty light. It was mostly in the forest surrounding Konoha that was damaged during the attack. A Okamikage Spec Ops agent reported to Shiori as she looked through the stack of paperwork on her desk and sorted it into piles for her Kage Bunshins to look over and sign, modify or discard. Our casualties, however, are heavy. Over 200 are wounded with serious injuries, 50 with minor injuries, and 100 are dead. For the civilians, there were no casualties, but numerous injuries due to panicking in the village during the attack. Shiori nodded at that. It could have been worse if the Kyuubi had reached the village, and the amount of casualties would have tripled. Also, the Spec Ops said, we've been getting reports of rumors going around the village. Shiori perked at that info, and frowned as she didn't like the sound of that. Rumors were dangerous, and mostly could be lies. What rumors? Shiori ordered in her commander voice. People are saying that the Kyuubi was never killed or even sealed properly, that it had taken the form of a young boy casting a spell over the Yondaime, fooling him into believing it's his kid. The agent reported in a disgusted voice, many are planning on freeing the Yondaime. Those goddamn civilian fools. Shiori shouted enraged. How dare they say that bullshit? Find who started the rumors and arrest them for treason and conspiracy against the Hokage now. With a shout of, "Hi!" the Spec Ops left the office to carry out the order, leaving Shiori to take her anger out on the desk by throwing it out the window, smashing onto the ground below, scaring the crap out of a few villagers. Damn them, growled Shiori as her yellow eyes burned with hatred. Damn them all to hell. Konoha Hospital, Uzumaki Namikaze room. What? Yelled Minato as he sat up in his bed, a look of anger on his face as he looked at Yugo Azuki, one of Kushina's most trusted students. That's right, Hokage-sama. Rumors are going around the village that Naruto-kun is the demon, said the purple-haired young woman with a look of disgust on her face. I'm willing to bet it was those damn civilian counselors, along with the Uchiha, and the elders. Minato gritted his teeth in anger, as Kushina held her baby protectively to her. Damn it. And they do this while I'm out of Kamizen. I'll personally sign their execution papers for this. Minato declared with a snarl. What is Shiori doing? She has the Ukamikage investigating the rumors, looking for the source, Yugao replied. Even though we know who is behind it, we have no proof. She had also ordered Anbu to detain anyone that makes any overt moves against you, Kushina-sensei, or Naruto-kun, as well as 7 squads guarding this hospital and your room to prevent anything from happening. Kushina growled as her eyes narrowed. Those damn bastards, why can't they let us live in peace? She asked angrily. Naruto-kun is not the goddamn Kyuubi. Naruto started to cry at the loud noises happening around him, and Kushina rocked him in her arms to calm him down. Shish, there Naruto-kun, it's okay. Ka-san's not gonna let the evil people get you. She cooed, and Naruto instantly calmed and started giggling. Minato smiled at the scene of his small family. Just then voices outside caught their attention, and it was one they recognize. Oh come on. I just got back to see my cousin who's dying because he saved my student, and now you say I can't see him. Came the angry voice of a female. I'm sorry, but you are not authorized to enter. A voice was heard before a Anbu flew through the door and out the opposing window and continued into the next building as Tsunade entered with a terrified Shizune behind her. Humph, Anbu, my, that boy was a runt. Tsunade declared, standing in the remains of the doorway as the room's occupant stared at her in shock. Still as brutal as ever, nay sensei? Kushina asked with a smile as Tsunade blinked and looked over at her. Kushina-chan, she asked, looking at her former student. Well, I'll be damned, so that's my godson, huh? Kushina giggled, as did Naruto when he saw his godmother. Tsunade smiled as she saw her godson and walked over to Kushina's bed to take a look. Well, ain't you a cutie? Cooed Tsunade as she rubbed her finger along one of his whiskered cheeks, making the blonde babe purr, much to the girl's likeness for the child, as they all give off a squeal of kawaii. And making Minato chuckle. If you're done playing with my nephew, cough, how about you come say hi to me? Said a raspy voice that caught Tsunade's attention. Looking over, Tsunade's eyes widened in shock at the sight of her cousin. Overnight he had grown thinner and more gaunt. Magoaki? She asked in shock, walking over to his bedside. What happened to you? Who did this to you? I did this to myself, Magoaki said, smiling up at Tsunade. Kushina-chan was dying, so I used a forbidden technique that the old hairball taught me to transfer my life force to her in order to save her. What? Tsunade shouted in shock. Why would you do such a foolish thing? Surely there must have been another way. Unfortunately there wasn't, Magoaki denied sadly. I don't regret it though. Dying to save a life has always been a fantasy of mine. Tsunade chuckled weakly as tears welled up in her eyes. You goddamn fool and your damned hero complex. A hand stroked her left cheek. Not that way, you pervs, as she looked back at her cousin who was still smiling. So do all Uzumaki, and the reason I did what I did is because I don't want Naruto to grow up alone like me, he said as Tsunade's tears fell onto his bed. You know my story of how I was alone, how my father and mother's last wish was cast aside by my village, that betrayed my parents' trust, he said sadly as tears started welling up in his eyes, too. Magoaki. Tsunade whispered. Please, do not let it happen to Naruto as well, protect them, and show this village the truth. He begged as tears fell out of his eyes. They cannot continue this path of self-destruction, and that is all their hatred will bring, is death and destruction. No one wants that. I promise, as a Senju I will not allow that to happen. Magoaki, Tsunade swore, I refuse to allow them to destroy Naruto and themselves. Magoaki gave a relieved smile at that. Good, now I need to give you something to hold onto, until the next Jinchuriki for the old wolf grows to be a genin, he said as he pointed to his jacket. On the inside of the left sleeve of my jacket is the summoning scroll for the Arctic Wolf clan. Everyone in the room was shocked by that. It's a blood seal, so only you, and any others of Uzumaki blood can unlock it and get the scroll, he told, and Tsunade nodded as she walked over to the jacket. Cutting her thumb, she winced at the sight of blood but pushed on regardless as she swiped it across the seal, and in a puff of smoke an old-looking scroll appeared. It was about half the size of the one Jiraiya carried with him, but it was undoubtedly a summoning scroll. I'll keep it safe, cousin. Tsunade swore, walking back to his side. Good, he said, smiling before coughing harshly. Damn it, this is defiantly more painful than I thought it would be. Idiot, you never do think things through, do you? Tsunade asked good-naturedly as she tried and failed to restrain her tears. But then again, that is another Uzumaki trait, isn't it? When one of your own is in trouble you all go running. Magoaki chuckled at that. Yeah, that's what we do. Anyo, excuse me, said a soft voice, and everyone turned to the source. In the doorway a heavily pregnant Hyuga stood there uncertainly. Her navy blue hair fell to her waist and her lavender eyes were filled with uncertainty. This is the room for Magoaki, right? The woman asked nervously. Hitomi-chan. Kushina shouted. Yeah, this is his room. How are you doing, girl? I'm fine, she replied nervously with a smile. Hitomi Hyuga, while one of the Han no Roku Tenshi, she was still one of the most uncertain and shyest person you will ever meet in a shinobi village. How are you, Kushina-chan? Kushina smiled at her friend. I'm doing fine, and so is my little Naruto-kun, she said as she gazed lovingly at her child. Hitomi looked at the child and couldn't help but squeal at how cute Naruto looked with his whisker marks. Ah, he's so kawaii, Kushina-chan, Hitomi said in delight. You're Hitomi Hyuga. Hitomi turned to the source of the voice and couldn't help but gasp in shock at the condition of the man she was there to meet. Why yes, I am. Are you Magoaki? She asked. I am, he confirmed as Hitomi nervously approached him. Don't worry, it's only the hairball that bites, not me. Hey, I resent that. Oh, shut it, hairball. Magoaki smiled gently as Hitomi approached him. How is you soon-to-be-born daughter doing? Ah, little Hinata-chan is doing fine, Hitomi assured quickly with a slight blush. So her name is Hinata, is it? Magoaki asked. That's a good name, may I? He asked again, raising his hand. Hitomi nodded nervously as the dying Uzumaki placed his hand on her swollen belly and channeled some of the wolf's chakra into it, allowing the old wolf to inspect his potential host. She is perfect for me, Fubukatsum said, startling Hitomi, who heard him as well. Don't worry, I am only ensuring that your daughter will be strong enough to hold me when she is born, and she is. I can see she will be very much like you, hey, very much like you indeed. Hitomi smiled and blushed at the comment. Okay, Fubukatsum dono, no need to embarrass her. Hitomi heard Magoaki's thoughts, and before she could say anything, Magoaki's told her, just think the words you want to say, Hitomi-sama. Oh, what's happening right now? She asked curiously and nervously. How are we speaking like this? We are currently connected through my chakra, the three of us, Fubukatsum answered. Can you not feel her? Your daughter. Concentrating, Hitomi could feel the barely formed thoughts of the life dwelling within her as she gasped in awe. This is amazing. She mentally whispered. It always is amazing feeling a new life being grown, Magoaki replied wistfully. She will be strong, your daughter, she has that very strength you carry within you. With that he cut the link, and to say Hitomi was awestruck was an understatement. Magoaki chuckled before he started coughing harshly again, worrying those around him. Magoaki, you must rest. You're putting too much strain on yourself, Tsunade chided in worry for her cousin's health. I know, Tsunade, I know, Magoaki replied as he looked at Hitomi and everyone else in the room. He then looked at Minato. Can you make a privacy seal in here, Minato? He asked the blonde, and the Yondaime nodded as he made the signs for the jutsu and the room glowed blue. All right, he said, listen to me, all of you. Tsunade, you already know the story, but these kids haven't, so. I'm going to them, he finished and Tsunade nodded in understanding and a hint of sadness. All right, what I'm about to tell you younglings, is my past, he said, and that got everyone's attention. It all started on the day of my birth, when my father Koya Sanada was the Shodai Yukikage, and my mother, Kikyo Uzumaki, was the previous Jinchuriki of the Hokubu Hakyoku Ukami no Seishin. Konoha Hospital. The people in the hospital looked at the dying Uzumaki with wide eyes. Tsunade was the first to break the silence. What? You never told me Kikyo-sama was a Jinchuriki. Not to mention the second container of the wolf, Tsunade said incredulously. Magoaki nodded. It's true, he confirmed, my mother was the second Jinchuriki of the Fubukatsume. The first Jinchuriki was her mother, so it's been something of a family thing for 3 generations. Wow, Minato said in surprise, who would have thought that the Uzumaki are the most common people to be used for the Jinchuriki. Magoaki just chuckled before he went into another coughing fit. Cough, cough, it's true though, come to think of it. I believe your grandmother was the first Jinchuriki to hold the Kyuubi Kitsune, Tsunade, he said, and Tsunade nodded her head and shocking the others. Yes, she told me when I was 10, but for some strange reason I don't know what, she released it, she said, and to say it got a reaction out of the others was an understatement. What? Why would Mito-sama do that? Kushina said as she held Naruto. Grandfather isn't certain, but. Tsunade began slowly with a hesitant look. He did mention something about Madara Uchiha. His thrice damned Sharingan can control the Biju and their hosts. Magoaki stated with a snarl of hatred. He may have controlled Mito Dono into releasing it. That may be, but, Tsunade began, and this confused Magoaki for a minute. But what? He asked her. The day before she released the fox, I saw her in the study in the clan compound, she said as the others looked at her giving their undivided attention. She looked very upset, well, more like pissed off. The others were starting to get curious as Tsunade continued. She kept grumbling something about power mongers, and traitors, and how they betrayed grandfather and her clan, she said, and this caused a few people to think. Then Magoaki's eyes widened in realization as he looked at Kushina. Tsunade, did anything happen before this? He asked her. Tsunade frowned in thought for a minute. Well, the only significant thing I can think of is Kushina-chan arriving that week and Uzushiogakure being destroyed the next day. She said, you don't think? Magoaki nodded. I think this explains the letter my Ka-san received that pissed her off so much, he replied. Cough, she ranted about some kind of traitor students and a war hawk needing to know his place. Tsunade's eyes widened in horrified realization before she gritted her teeth in rage. Those old crones, and that one-eyed mummy, she yelled as she slammed her fist into a chair, smashing it to pieces, making Naruto wail as Kushina said comforting words to calm him down as Minato looked at them in confusion. What is it? What's wrong? Minato asked as Tsunade calmed down, but her eyes still had that fiery rage look in them. That bastard Danzo and my sensei's so-called teammates. Tsunade growled. What? Minato shouted in shock and anger. Homura and Kaharu, no wonder they were so pissed lately. I remember that bandage bastard, Kushina growled, and his root bastards trying to kidnap me. Hitomi with a look of shock managed to stammer out, but why? What would Danzo, and the elders gain by destroying Uzushio, and attempting to kidnap Kushin-chan. Weren't we supposed to be allies? Alliances are seen as weakness in the eyes of Danzo and the elders, Hitomi. Nothing else matters to them, Minato growled out. Also don't forget the Uzumaki are strong because of their high chakra reserves that make them live longer than an average human and have a strong talent for fuinjutsu, not to mention their secondary best talent for kenjutsu. Danzo and the elders saw them as a threat, and if the Uzumaki ever found out that one of their clan was treated as a weapon, well, let's just say it wouldn't have been pretty. Take Kushina-chan in her bloody habanero mode and times it by 100. Shiori clarified, gaining a collective wince from around the room. Should I send out an order for their arrest, Minato? Minato frowned in thought for a minute. Not yet, he answered. We'll wait until I'm fully recovered. We'll have a better chance than to actually capture or eliminate them. Shiori nodded and then noticed the curious, shocked look Yugao was giving her. What? How did you get past the barrier seal? Yugao asked. Shiori just grinned. That's classified, Yugi-chan, she chirped as Yugao just sweat dropped. She's keyed to the seal so she can just walk in. Kushina answered, grinning at the pouting Shiori, and I'm all for kicking some counsel. Tsunade rolled her eyes and bopped her former student's head. Your newly born son says otherwise, Kushina. She growled out, pointing to Naruto, who began fussing. I think the Gaki's hungry. Kushina chuckled as she began to feed Naruto, much to her cousin's embarrassment and Jiraiya's joy. If I see anything I shouldn't in any of your books, Jiraiya, I'll make sure you are scared away from all women and make you gay. Kushina threatened with a sweet smile. Jiraiya paled as he kept his mouth shut. Magoaki was looking at the woman nervously, remembering another redhead he met years prior. Yep, they're exactly alike, except Kana actually goes beyond her threats, Magoaki thought with a shudder, and then Magoaki remembered something. Kushina, do you know any Uzumaki by the name of Kana? He asked. Kushina froze and stared at Magoaki in something akin to shock. Kana? She asked, her eyes wide. Did you see her? Magoaki blinked. Yeah, she's a Jinchuriki of the Higashi Adana Inawashi no Seishin, Eastern Great Golden Eagle Spirit. He answered. She had apparently escaped the destruction of Uzu. Kana ne is alive. Kushina whispered in shock as tears began to well. I thought she had died. She almost did, Magoaki said, and Kushina looked at him, her eyes filled with worry. She washed on the shores of Nami no Kuni barely alive, when Kajidzume Dono found her. Kajidzume, Tsunade said as she quirked an eyebrow. The eagle, Tsunade's mouthed a silent. Oh, after that she healed Kana by making her into Kajidzume Dono's Jinchuriki, Magoaki told them. Minato's eye was twitching as he thought about the recent events concerning Magoaki, Lady Mito, and now Kushina's supposed to be dead sister. No offense, Kushina-chan, I just really feel the need to get this out there. But is every Jinchuriki related to the Uzumaki? Minato shouted, asked in irritation. Magoaki sighed at Minato's outburst. To answer that question, Minato, no, not all Jinchuriki are related to the Uzumaki. Cough, 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 he answered as he went into another fit of coughing, and this time as he moved his hand away, blood appeared. Shit. Tsunade cursed as she moved next to him, her hand glowing with green healing chakra. Your illness is getting worse, she said, fretting over her cousin. You need to rest. Magoaki waved her off as soon as his coughing fit subsided. I'll have all the rest I need soon, he assured. Where was I? Alright, I had ran into Kana-san while I was traveling the world. I was looking for other Jinchuriki and helping them with their seals if they were having trouble with them. Thankfully though I didn't need to do it very often. The others nodded at that, since some villages treat their Jinchuriki less harshly than others, like Iwa, Kiri, or Suna. Speaking of Jinchurikis, he said as he suddenly glowed white. Magoaki? Kushina asked in concern as he glowed for a bit more. It's nothing to worry about, I'm only calling the other Jinchuriki of the Shugo-Rei, guardian spirits. He assured as the glow stopped. They will be able to help tell my story and aid Hinata and Naruto with their burdens, he said as their eyes widened, especially Kushina's. She was finally going to see her sister, who she thought was dead for so long, and finally be able to catch up with her. That also means Kana-ne-chan is coming, she said as tears welled up in her eyes, this time in joy, and she looked down at Naruto. Hear that, Naru-chan, you're going to see your Baba-chan, she said as the little baby giggled at seeing more of his family. Magoaki smiled at Kushina doting over Naruto making cooing noises causing the boy to laugh as he gripped at her long red hair much to everyone's amusement. It should only take Kana a couple of days if she's in Nami, about a week if she's visiting Tetsu Rimasu in Tetsu no Kuni, he explained chuckling as Naruto refused to let go of Kushina's hair, then my lover Reime Akanako should only be a couple days from Cha no Kuni. Tsunade looked at him when he said that, lover. Magoaki then rubbed behind his head grinning sheepishly, yeah, I sorta fell in love with the Jinchuriki of the jungle tiger, he answered sheepishly, we had met a long while back, we never did get married though. Magoaki's face fell slightly as his eyes went distant, and she was unable to have children after a miscarriage. Oh, Tsunade said as Kushina winced at that, unable to cope what would happen if she had had a miscarriage with Naruto, she wouldn't be able to live with it, neither would Minato. It's okay, Magoaki assured them, though there was a hint of sadness in his voice, we've gotten over it since then. In his mind though, it still hurts to lose a child that you will never be able to meet. To love, care, and teach that child. So what do you know about the other Shugo Rei Jinchuriki? Minato asked, turning everyone's thoughts away from the depressing thought. Kana-san is much like Kushina, Magoaki said smiling in remembrance, I had met her first, and she introduced me to the other Shugo Rei Jinchurikis including Reime-chan. I can bet they are definitely beautiful ladies, Jiraiya spoke up with a perverted look on his face which caused all the women to growl and Magoaki to glare, making Jiraiya shut up. Reime-chan, of the Akanako shinobi clan of Cha no Kuni, who contains the Minami Janguru Tora no Seishin, southern jungle tiger spirit, of Cha no Kuni, is beautiful, kind, a little bit on the feisty side, but also loves children dearly. After the miscarriage, we then talked about adopting a baby one day instead. So far we haven't found the right one yet, he said with regret, but it only lasted for a second as he continued on. Tetsu, the Jinchuriki of the Saiyo no Kami Ryu Seishin, Western Divine Dragon Spirit, of Tetsu no Kuni, he's a great person to be around. Son of a strong samurai of the Rimasu clan and a cunning kunoichi, always modest, he'll protect his friends and loved ones no matter what. His face then blanched all of a sudden, his tofu soup sucks though. Everyone laughed at his joke before he erupted into another fit of coughs, maybe you should rest for a bit Magoaki. Tsunade suggested, you can tell us your story once you have. Magoaki sighed irritably, but I don't want a nap. He mocked whined even as he laid himself down causing another round of chuckles, I just hope the others arrive soon. I'll send my okamikage to meet with them, she told Magoaki, while in the meantime I'll search for more evidence to bring those bastards down, she finished as she turned and left the room. Jiraiya nodded as he left via the window, also planning on finding more evidence, with Yugao leaving to talk to Kamachi, another of Kushina's students along with Itachi, and Rin, another of Minato's last students. Hitomi also said her farewells, with a friendly hug to Kushina and Naruto then left back to the Hyuga compound. Tsunade stayed, while she told Shizune to find a hotel so that she can rest, with her apprentice nodding in understanding and left. Now it was just Minato, Kushina, their son, Tsunade and Magoaki, as said medic used her healing chakra to ease the dying Uzumaki's pain. Magoaki's thought before he let sleep take him was his beloved, and fellow Jinchuriki. Reime-chan, I'm sorry we lost our child, and not being able to adopt one as our own. I hope you can forgive me, with that he let himself be claimed by sleep. Nami no Kuni, a beautiful red-headed woman with amethyst-colored eyes wearing a skin-tight one-piece neck-to-toe suit that was red with a black trim and had a face mask covering her lower face. Along with a chakudo with a whirlwind-shaped guard strapped to her back and a set of kamas attached to holsters on her legs, think of Kushina in red version of Sengo's Inuyasha outfit and take away the boomerang and add the kamas. And you have it, as she was in her treehouse in Nami preparing to make her way to Konoha, the home of the bastard that led the attack that killed her family, destroyed her home, and planned to use her older sister as the next Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi no Kitsune, but now, after receiving a mental message from her friend, fellow Jinchuriki, and Uzumaki, Magoaki, she was spared that fate by the Shadaime Hokage's wife and member of her clan, Mito Uzumaki. And now my Anui older sister, is married to the Yondaime, has a baby boy, that was born just 36 hours ago, and now his life is in danger because he's the container of said fox, she thought as she gave a exasperated sigh, only you could get into such trouble Oni-chan, big sister. She said as she sealed all the necessary essentials into storage scrolls. It was then a thought came to her. I better send a message to Jenisk-san, and Oboro-chan, she said as she pulled a blank scroll and started writing her message to her friends on Nagi Island. After a few minutes of writing, she rolled up the scroll and made her way outside and made a whistle call. A few seconds later, a small black and silver blur zipped through the trees and landed on the railing of the front porch of the tree house. The figure was a peregrine falcon as it looked at Kana. Hey there Shirokaze, White Wind, can you take this to Oboro-chan and Jenisk-san? Kana asked, smiling at her messenger bird, who nodded and turned around so that she could attach the carrier tube to his back. Thank you, I'll probably be in Konoha when you return, alright. The bird nodded again before taking off with a couple flaps of his wings and headed off for the remote island. Now, Kana thought, time to go see Oni-chan and my little nephew. She smiled at the last part, knowing she will spoil her sister's son Rodden when she sees him. After sealing her scrolls in various seals on her person, she left her home and arrived in a clearing and disappeared in a swirl of wind. Konoha Hospital. Kushina smiled softly, cooing at Naruto as he laughed, gripping her finger tightly, playing with it. Such a strong grip you have. She exclaimed happily, making the baby laugh again. Magoaki chuckled as he watched the mother and son interact along with Minato. You're going to have your hands full with that one, he predicted, grinning at the blonde Hokage. Minato chuckled good-naturedly at that, as he leaned on the crutch he had due to his weakened state. I know, but I'm going to cherish it as long as possible. My family is my light, and I would never trade this for the strongest jutsu, ever, Minato said with conviction as Magachi nodded, feeling very envious of the blonde, wishing he could have this with Reime. I wonder what life would be like if we did manage to have a child. He wondered to himself, looking out the window with a far-off look. Would I still be here doing this? Or would I have remained at Reime-chan's side all this time? A sudden flare in his senses broke him out of his reverie as he felt a familiar presence. Oh. Kana-chan has arrived. That was quicker than I thought, he stated in slight surprise. Kushina jerked her head up in surprise at that, but before she can ask anything, sounds of shouting and screaming came from the hallway. Hey, who are you? Stop. No, not there. Have mercy. Out of my way, you. Everyone turned to the door just in time to see said blast open with the body of an Anbu flying through at high speeds and impacting against the furthest wall, and then a woman in a red skin-tight suit with black trimming and with a chikuto on her waist and 2 commas on her thighs in special holsters. Kushina-chan. Kana shouted as she entered the room carrying another Anbu, Magoaki-kun. Magoaki just smiled. Hey Kana-chan, you're earlier than expected. In fact, you weren't supposed to be here for another 2 days, he joked as he coughed at the end. Baka. Kana shouted at him. I get word that you and my sister are in the hospital. What the hell do you expect to happen? Me just to stroll in discussing the smell of the daisies I smelt on my way here? She demanded as Magoaki sweated nervously. But before Kana could hasten her old friend's demise, a voice almost similar to her own caught her attention. Kana ne. The sister of Kushina froze at her name being said as she turned and saw said sister lying in a bed with a blonde-haired man, both in hospital pajamas, with an infant in her arms. Oh Oni-chan. Kana stuttered as she dropped the knocked-out Anbu on the ground and walked toward her sister, who she hadn't seen in years, as she removed her face mask. The silence in the room was tense as the two sisters stared at each other for a few minutes before they simultaneously broke out into tears and hugged each other tightly as Minato pulled Naruto out of the way to avoid him being crushed. I thought you had died, Kana. Kushina mumbled as she hugged her younger sister tightly. Why didn't you contact me to let me know you were alright? Kana's tears didn't stop as she held her older sister tightly. I couldn't, because I was led to believe you were being brainwashed to serve as a slave to Konoha, she cried out, and Kushina's eyes snapped open at that as she looked Kana in the eye. Who told you that? She said as Kana broke down more into crying and Kushina embraced her. It was 2 days after you left, Uzushio was attacked. Flashback no Jutsu. Uzushiogakure, 15 years ago. A 7-year-old Kana cried as she ran as fast as her legs would allow her to, putting distance between her and her burning home, her father's order to go to Konoha still ringing through her mind. Tripping, she collapsed to the ground, sobbing in grief as she remembered seeing her fellow clansmen and family being slaughtered like animals despite how hard they were fighting as Iwa's and Kumo's armies swarmed Uzushiogakure. To-san. Ka-san. Kana sobbed as she got back up, but before she could continue, she began to hear raised voices. Curious, she walked toward the source of the speaking. As she came across a clearing, she could see 3 people talking, and 2 were ninja from the 2 villages that attacked her home, while the other was dressed as one of Konoha's Anbu Black Ops, but what was strange to her was that the mask the Anbu wore was blank, and had the kanji for, ne. Inform Danzo-sama that we have completed the objective, one of the men said. Uzumaki Kushina should be far easier to manipulate with the destruction of her village. Kana stifled a gasp at the sound of her elder sister's name as the Konoha-dressed Anbu nodded and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. No, it couldn't be, she thought desperately as tears streaked her face, they couldn't be talking about Oni-chan. As she thought about the fate of her sister, the 2 men continued to converse. This incident could ignite another war, said the Kumo-dressed ninja in a emotionless tone, as his Iwa Kamapnyan just nodded. Yes, just as Danzo-sama wanted in order to obtain the position of Hokage. With that, the 2 ninja vanished as Kana let it out, as she held her knees to her chest as tears leaked out of her eyes as she thought about what the 2 ninjas said. Apparently a man called Danzo wants the title of Hokage, and annihilated an allied village just to gain that power, and it involved her sister somehow, but what? Flashback no Jutsu Kai. Asterisk. Kana sat beside her sister as tears ran down her face, remembering that day. Kushina herself wasn't in any better condition as she sobbed before grabbing and hugging her sister tightly. Minato snarled and limped to the doorway and opened it. Go get Shiori now. He ordered in a tone that brooked no argument lest the Anbu guard wanted to be on the receiving end of Minato's famous Hiroshin Rasengan combo. Hi, Hokage-sama, the Anbu stammered in fear as he left to carry out his orders, and Minato turned and walked back to the 2 Uzumaki sisters, Naruto in his arms. Damn you, Danzo, you will regret the day you attacked Uzushio. What you did was just pure treason, and now I have enough evidence for you to be executed, he growled in his mind as he looked down at his son in his arms, and gave a warm smile as he reached the side of the bed. Kana-san, he said, causing said other redhead to look at her brother-in-law, how would you like to see your nephew for the first time? Kana perked and walked over to them, before taking Naruto out of Minato's arms, smiling widely at her nephew. Oh, aren't you just adorable? She squealed, tickling Naruto's stomach, making the blonde giggle wildly at the attention. Oh, I am going to enjoy spoiling you rotten. Minato, Kushina, and Magoaki, though with a cough here and there, laughed at the scene, and it was exactly this that Shiori walked into. Minato, I got your mess. Who are you? The acting Hokage shouted in alarm as she saw the woman who looked exactly like Kushina but wearing some type of skin-tight suit and her hair in ponytail with Naruto in her arms, as she began drew her katana strapped to her back. Shiori, wait, Kushina shouted, that's my sister. Sister or not? Wait. What? Shiori shouted in shock, didn't your sister die? Kana just looked at Shiori while she held her nephew protectively. The circumstances of my death have been greatly exaggerated, she said in an even tone, and who, may I ask, are you? Shiori shook herself of her shock as she looked at the other redhead. I'm Shiori Okamikaze, head of the Okamikaze clan and acting Hokage until after Minato-kun recovers, she said as she went on guard watching for anything suspicious. Kushina groaned as the two continued to eye each other. Kana-chan, Shiori-chan is a very good friend of mine, Kushina said evenly hoping to defuse the situation. Shi-chan, Kana-chan has some good info on Danzo for us to use against him. Shiori blinked and looked at Kushina in surprise, who nodded. That's why I called you here, Minato announced, getting her attention. We are going to go on the offensive against Danzo, no more sitting around while he destroys Konoha from the inside. Shiori stood there, shock written on her face at what she just heard, and she did something that made everyone in the room want to scream like a little girl. She gave a very dark, insane grin. What's the info, Minato-kun? She asked, and Minato could only smile back. Let's just say we now know what really happened to Uzushio. Meanwhile, on the road 5 miles from the Cha no Kuni, Hai no Kuni border, a beautiful-looking woman that appeared to be in her mid-30s with brown hair in a ponytail and light brown eyes leapt through the trees with a practiced ease, making a beeline for Konohagakure. She was wearing a completely black kunoichi outfit with a ninjutsu strapped to her back and a pair of clawed gauntlets hanging from her waist. Looks like Kasumi in her black ninja outfit with black scarf. Her thoughts on a certain Jinchuriki of a certain wolf. Stupid baka. What the hell were you thinking using that jutsu? She yelled in her mind as she continued on her way as fast as possible. Reime-sensei, shouted a young female voice. Wait for us, shouted another as Reime came to a stop as two girls, who looked to be 13 to 14 respectively, caught up to her, and both were out of breath. One of the two girls, who looked to be the oldest and wearing a blue battle kimono that was sleeveless with a black obi belt and stopped at her thighs, and wore fishnet armor underneath that stopped at her knees, and wearing dark blue-colored tabi socks with waraji sandals. She also had a wakizashi strapped to her back and 2 kunai pouches on both thighs. She had chocolate brown eyes and her black shoulder-length hair was in a high ponytail just like her sensei, Naruto version of Sarina from Inuyasha, as she panted trying to catch her breath. The other, who appeared to be her younger sister, was also wearing the same type of battle kimono, but it was a dark yellow. She was also wearing fishnet armor and kunai pouches, and wearing yellow tabi socks with waraji sandals. She had a kusarigama tucked in her obi behind her back. Her black hair was pulled into a small ponytail at the base of her neck and had a few freckles on her face, Naruto version of Suzuna from Inuyasha, as she too panted trying to bring back oxygen into her lungs. Reime raised her eyebrow at the pair. Didn't I tell the two of you to stay home? She asked in annoyance. This is a rather personal matter I have to attend to. The elder sister managed to get enough air back into her lungs to respond. You really think that me pant and Suzuna would just let you go by yourself, sensei? She said as Suzuna nodded in agreement but panting less than her sister. Sarina's right, sensei. Pant, we would always follow you wherever you go, no matter what, she said with conviction as Reime looked at her two apprentices and sighed. She then smiled at the two. What would I do without you two? Reime said, shaking her head and shrugging. I expect the two of you to keep up with me. Time is of the essence right now. Why is that, sensei? Suzuna asked curiously as the pair managed to regain their breath. Reime lowered her head at that. It's Magoaki-kun, that got the girls' attention as they listened intently. The two kunoichi in training knew Magoaki and Reime when they rescued the two from a Iowa nin ambush, after said ninja destroyed their village, and wiped out most of their clan during the Third Great Shinobi War. They looked up to Magoaki as an older brother, secondary father type figure, while they saw Reime as a mother figure since they never knew theirs. They knew the two Jinchuriki were close, and if Reime was giving that look, it wasn't good. And Reime confirmed it. He's dying, she half whispered looking out towards Konoha. I felt his summon, he's getting weaker by the day. What? Magoaki-sensei is dying? Sarina asked in shock. That can't be true. Yeah, Suzuna agreed determinedly, he's uber strong. No way he would be dying. Reime shook her head regretfully. Unfortunately he is dying, she whispered. he gave his life to save his cousin's life. His cousin? Serena asked in curiosity as Reime nodded her head. Yes, on his mother's side, one of the Uzumaki clan, she said. Apparently it was Kana-chan's sister, that made the two girls' eyes bug out. Kana-ne has a sister. They both yelled simultaneously, making Reime giggled at the pair as they waved their arms around. Why didn't she tell us? Reime's smile faltered at the question. That is a very personal reason to Kana-chan you too, she said, shaking her head. Only Kana-chan can answer the question. The two teens understood that what happened to Kana's clan and village was the same way that happened to theirs. Well, what are we waiting for then? Suzuna chirped as Serena nodded in agreement. Reime smiled softly at the two girls before nodding and taking off into the trees with the two sisters in close pursuit. Konoha Hospital. Kana laughed merrily as she listened to Minato and Kushina talk about Kushina's life growing up in Konoha, with the two either smirking deviously or flustered in embarrassment. I can't believe you did that, Oni-chan. Kana yelled, holding her thigh from laughing so much. Kushina glared at Minato, who was sweating nervously, while blushing in embarrassment at the same time. It's not funny, Imouto. Kushina shouted, while Kana kept laughing as she held her sides. Magoaki, surprisingly, was asleep during the whole conversation, though he did cough once in a while. Before Kana could counter, the door opened and Minato's student Kakashi Hatake walked in, a conflicted look on his face as he looked at Naruto, causing Kushina to be on guard as she held him close. Yes, Kakashi? Kushina asked with a raised eyebrow and a dangerous look in her eye. Kakashi stiffened at the look in her eye. Hi sensei, Kushina-san, he greeted with a slight wave. I wanted to see how you two were doing with all that's happened. Minato smiled, but kept his guard up. One couldn't be too careful. We're fine, Kakashi. Thanks for your concern, Minato said in a polite tone, but Kakashi knew by the look in his sensei's eyes that he was testing to see if he will attempt to do anything to Naruto, and Kakashi sighed in defeat. I know what you're thinking, sensei, he said in a tired tone, and to tell you the truth, I just don't know who to believe. Objectively, I know he is not the Kyuubi any more than you are, but all that power and malice inside of him. It makes me nervous thinking about it. Before Minato could say anything, chuckling was heard from the bed Magoaki was in, as said Jinchuriki was awake and looking at the Hatake with a calculating stare. I wouldn't worry about that, Kakashi Hatake, son of Tsukumo Hatake, aka the Shiroi Kiba White Fang, he said as Kakashi looked at the former Yuki nin suspiciously. Who are you and what do you mean? Kakashi growled, demanded, narrowing his visible eye at the bedridden man who chuckled. Do you really think that your sensei would use an inferior seal to seal the Kyuubi on his own son without being sure that it wouldn't affect said son? Magoaki accused sharply, his eyes bearing deep into Kakashi, making the white-haired young man shift uncomfortably. Have you so little faith in your teacher? It is a wonder you learned anything if you do not have faith in him. Kakashi lowered his head in shame. And to think you are Tsukumo's son, at least he didn't judge people before he got to know them, he said, making Kakashi jerk his head up, his eye widening slightly. Yes, I knew your father, kiddo. He was a good man. He did the right thing, and instead of being congratulated as a hero, he was ostracized by his ungrateful friends. I wish you turned out more like him. Kakashi flinched at the tone the Uzumaki used, but now he was curious. How do you know my father? Kakashi demanded as Magoaki smirked. I met him 6 years before you were even born, pup. He and your mother were part of the few friends I had. And when I heard what happened after that mission, Hiruzen contacted me and asked that I try to console him as best as I could, he said as he remembered that day when Tsukumo chose to save his friends over completing the mission, but it was no use. He was beyond the point of no return as he drowned in his misery and pain, all because his so-called friends betrayed him. Tell me, Kakashi, will you follow your father's path, or his friend's path? Kakashi flinched at the hidden accusation within Magoaki's words as he looked over at the snoozing Naruto, who was held against Kushina's chest comfortably. I will choose my father's path, he stated with conviction. To do any less would shame the Hatake name I carry. Magoaki smiled at that. Kakashi, your parents will be proud, he said and then remembered something. Come to think of it, I believe my friend Tetsu's mother was a Hitaki, he said, which caused the eyes of everyone, except Kana because she already knew, to widen, but Kakashi's eyes were wider, as they looked at him. Are you saying, I still have family? Quite possibly, Magoaki confirmed with a nod. Tetsu said his mom was related to Tsukumo, and Tsukumo said he had an older sister that left Konoha a while back, so yeah, Tetsu could quite be your cousin. Kakashi's mind was processing the information that Magoaki said. But, I have some important advice to you when he comes in a few days, Magoaki says as Kakashi listens closely as the Jinchuriki's face contorted to that of fear and disgust. Don't, I repeat, don't try his tofu soup. He said as the others laughed, and Kakashi was confused. Why? Asked Kakashi. What is so bad about it? Tetsu-kun, while a nice man and very devoted cannot cook, Kana explained, and his tofu soup has been declared a biological weapon of war by several countries. Meanwhile, in Tsuchi no Kuni, a man dressed in a olive drab karate gi, with black ninja tabi boots, tan-colored leg guards, and wearing a short-sleeved black haori coat with a red kanji for dragon on the back, he was also wearing a ninja mask based off Masamori's attire from Kakashi. He had silver spiky, dark eyes, and at a height of 6 feet 1 inch. He had on his person the occasional Daisho 2 sword set. He was moving through Tsuchi no Kuni at fast pace when he sneezed. Ah, you got to be kiddin' me. The man said with a thick accent, Irish, who would be talking about me at this time. Hopefully it's my dear sweet lass Kana-chan. It may very well be, Tetsu, it may be, said the now identified Tetsu as he continued on his way to Konoha. Master Tetsu, do you think it's a real good idea to go through Tsuchi no Kuni to Konoha? Said a young man nervously, who looked to be in his mid-teens. He was wearing what appeared to be a mix of samurai armor and ninja attire that was blue with black trimming, and he also had a daisho set. He had black shoulder-length hair, and emerald green eyes and stood at a height of 5 feet 8 inches as he ran alongside his mentor. What if we run into a Iowa patrol out here? Not ta worry lad, Tetsu assured his apprentice Kashiwara. I know some of the patrols, worse than we'll be stopping off for a pint before going on our way. Kashiwara's eye twitched. I highly doubt that, master. He shouted back in irritation. That one patrol wasn't very happy with you after the last time. You beat them all to an inch of their life. Well, they shouldn't have called Kana-chan a whore, Tetsu replied. Those lads brought it upon themselves, they did. But now they'll tell the Tsuchikage what happened and send more patrols after us. Kashiwara countered, as he didn't like the idea of an entire hidden village's shinobi force on their tails. Don, worry boyo, we just have to keep running until we get to the border then. Tetsu replied and Kashiwara just sighed in defeat. I give up, he said in a tired tone as the duo continued on to Konoha. Konoha Hospital. Yup. Tetsu-kun is a horrible cook, but a good person to have to watch your back. Kana repeated with an enthusiastic fist pump. Definitely Kushina-chan, San's sister. Everyone, sans Kushina, thought at once, sweat dropping. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. A soft female voice spoke up and everyone turned, and there standing in the doorway was Makoto Uchiha, Kushina's best friend and the wife of Fugaku Uchiha, though, for how long was the number one ultimate question as she walked into the room. Miko-chan, Kushina exclaimed happily as she walked into the room. Hey Kushi-chan, how are you feeling? She said with a warm smile as she walked into the room. I'm feeling much better now. Sensei said I can go home after she checks Naruto-kun out, Kushina explained to her friend as she moved Naruto into a more comfortable position. Ah, he looks just like Minato. Makoto squealed in excitement, looking Naruto over, and those adorable whisker marks are so cute. Magoaki leaned over to Minato, who had moved to stand beside him to allow the girls some more space. Your boy will be quite the heartbreaker in his teen years. He predicted with a slight smirk. Minato chuckled weakly. Jiraiya-sensei is going to have a field day with him then. He agreed, rubbing the back of his head. Then the two men felt an aura of doom wash over them as they looked over and saw the Uzumaki sisters and Makoto glaring at them, as Kushina said a demon-like voice. If he even thinks of using my son's love life as research for his perverted books, I will kill him. The two males were now sweating bullets. Not if we get a hold of him first, said a new voice, and everyone looked toward the door and saw two women looking into the room smiling. One was a wild-looking woman wearing the traditional Jonin outfit, with wild spiky hair and brown slitted eyes. She was smiling ferally as she looked into the room. The other woman was also wearing a Jonin outfit, but the shirt and pants were black and there were signs of fishnets in place of the bandages. She had black hair in a shoulder-length ponytail and has light brown eyes as she smiled at the scene in front of her. They were Sume Inuzuka and Yoshino Nara, Jonins of Konoha and members of the Ha no Roku Tenshi. Su-chan, Yoshi-chan. Kushina shouted excitedly, "You made it." Sume laughed as Yoshino huffed, "Why did you nickname me after a green dinosaur?" Yoshino asked in irritation, "I swear taking you to the mainland corrupted you." Kushina laughed at her friend's irritation. Yoshino never liked her nickname because it reminded her of a character from a certain very old video game, Mario Brothers. And she hated them both. Before she could comment though, Sume saw Kana sitting on the bed next to her. Kushi-chan, who's this?" the Inuzuka patriarch asked. Kushina shifted nervously for a second, awaiting the reaction of the second and third most violent members of Ha no Roku Tenshi. Behind herself, of course, Su-chan, Miko-chan, Yoshi-chan, "This is my sister Kana-chan," she said, introducing them. She had survived Uzushiogeku's destruction and went into hiding because of what she overheard from some of Danzo's root members about him controlling me. Minato then began to count backwards in his head. 3, 2, 1. W-hot was the combined yell of the three friends of Kushina that was heard all the way to Tetsu no Kuni. Surprisingly, Naruto was still asleep from the outburst. "That old cripple. Tell us the whole story. Everything. I've wanted to deck him hard for so long, it makes want to hurt somebody," Sume demanded as her eyes burned with a righteous fury. "I want to tear that bastard a new asshole. Now I'll get my chance," Yoshino growled as she cracked her knuckles. Makoto didn't say anything, but everyone could tell she was angry because she hated the War Hawk with every fiber of her being. And the fact her Sharingan was activated and spinning wildly told the whole story. Near the Tsuchi-Kusa border. Master, what was that?" Kashiwara asked nervously as he looked around. "That laddie was alas scorned," Tetsu explained in his rare serious voice, "the most dangerous thing in the world." Kashiwara could only gulp. "I hope that we're not on the other end of that woman's wrath." 50 miles from Konoha. SSS Sensei. What was that? Suzuna said in fear as she and Serena held each other in fear. "That, my dears, is the sound of a group of very angry females," Reime said to her students as she smirked, knowing that some poor dumb schmuck was in deep shit, literally. Konoha Hospital. Well, better add ruptured eardrum to the list of my injuries. Magoaki groaned, rubbing his right ear while Minato chuckled weakly. Danzo won't know what hit his wrinkled. The women turned towards his direction and immediately, their demeanor changes from anger to shock at the sight of Magoaki's condition. Kushina saw their looks and decided to introduce them. "Girls, this is Magoaki Uzumaki Sanada, my cousin. He's the one who saved me and provided Minato the seal to use for the sealing," Kushina said in a solemn tone. "It's nice to meet you ladies, although I wish it were under better circumstances," Magoaki said, bowing slightly before coughing harshly for a couple of seconds. "My word, what happened to you?" Makoto asked in concern, looking him over. Magoaki smiled sadly. "This is the result of transferring your life force to another being," he explained. "It was the only way to save Kushina-chan, but I do not regret it at all." The three women gasped in shock that this man, who they all know as Kushina's cousin, sacrificed his life to save hers, and he even doesn't even regret it. To them, it was the most damn good thing they ever heard of a man. Too bad their husbands aren't like that. Sume was the first to recover as she looked at the dying Uzumaki. So you're the one who saved Kushi-chan? Sume asked and received a nod in confirmation. Then you have my deepest thanks. Sume said, bowing to the man, if you need anything from the Inuzuka, let me know and I will do everything within my power to make it happen. Magoaki smiled at Sume. Thank you for your kind offer, he said with a bow of his own. I'm not sure about my clan in general, but Kushina is my friend. You have my deepest thanks as well, Makoto said with a bow of her own, and Magoaki returned it. If my lazy husband doesn't do anything, I will. Thank you for saving Kushina. The Nara are indebted to you, Yoshino said as she bowed as well. Thank you all. Cough, 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 Magoaki said, but then coughed harshly. Do you need me to get Tsunade? Minato asked in concern, helping Magoaki sit up. Magoaki coughed a final time as the fit passed. No, I'm alright, he assured. Guess I'm just getting excited. I can feel Reime-chan getting closer. Tetsu isn't far behind either. Minato nodded at that. He turned to the girls who had looks of worry on their faces. His fellow Jinchuriki are coming here. Kana is one too, he said, making the friends of Kushina turn to her, and the sister of Kushina chuckled nervously as she rubbed behind her head. Shiori has already sent the Okamikage out to meet with them, Minato told them, and the three women nodded at that, knowing the Okamikage had loyalty to Konoha and the Okamika's clan in general, and Shiori was good friends with Minato. Before any of them could say anything, a female Anbu wearing a wolf mask came into the room. Sensei, shouted the female's voice, and Minato could tell it was panicked. Rin, what is it? Minato ordered, and Rin nodded her head in response. We have a problem. A mob is gathering, she said, and everyone had a shocked look on their face. What? Minato roared, enraged. Why? Rin gasped for breath as she answered. The civilian council led by Fugaku has begun an uprising. They're saying that you are harboring the Kyuubi reborn. That's bullshit. How can they believe them? Kushina shouted in outrage. Before anyone could say a word, an amount of Ki filled the room, and the person emanating it was Makoto herself, her Sharingan burning red and the Kama spinning wildly. That arrogant bastard, Makoto hissed as she turned toward the door. Miko-chan, where are you going? Yoshino said. Makoto turned and looked back at them, giving them an eerie smile. Why? Something I should have done long ago, she said all too sweetly, like when I was forced to marry that bastard. Everyone shivered at her tone as she stalked away, closely followed by Sume, Yoshino and Kana along with Rin and Kakashi. It's always the quiet ones. Magoaki said, shivering slightly. Minato could only nod in agreement. When Naruto started crying and Kushina was doing all she could to calm him, Minato limped over and embraced his family, vowing he will protect them with his life. It's okay, Naru-chan. I promise that we will protect you from these ignorant fools. I swear it. As Yondaime Hokage, a husband, and as a parent, were his thoughts as he hugged his family tighter. Magoaki was looking at the scene with a smile, but on the inside he was beginning to panic. Hurry, Reime-chan. Tetsu, I don't know how long we can last with just the wives of the major clans, he called out mentally with his chakra getting affirmative replies. 25 miles east from Konoha. Suzuna, Serena, I'm going on ahead. Something has happened, just keep going on this road. Reime ordered sharply before vanishing in a massive burst of speed. Hold on, Magoaki-kun. 30 miles west of Konoha. Lad, keep on this road, Tetsu ordered harshly as his skin began to turn black. Magoaki is in trouble, I'm going on ahead. Yes, master. Kashiwara confirmed sharply as Tetsu took off like a rocket heading for Konoha. Hang on, my friend, I'm coming as fast as I can, were his thoughts as he screamed toward Konoha. Konoha, outside the hospital. The scene in Konoha was that of a showdown between Anbu, the Okamikage Spec Ops, 3 of the Ha-Roku no Tenshi, Kana and other shinobi loyal to Minato on one side, with the mob of civilians, the civilian council, and shinobi from the Uchiha clan on the other. Kakashi, wearing his Anbu mask, was only thinking one thing about all this. This won't end well, he thought as Shiori stepped forward decked out in her Okamikage armor. Not well at all. What is the meaning of this? Shiori shouted enraged as her eyes swept the crowd angrily. We demand the Kyuubi reborn. One of the civilians shouted, the Kyuubi has to be killed for good. Shiori gritted her teeth in anger at the idiocy of these civilians. Naruto is not the Kyuubi reborn. He's the son of the Yondaime and his wife. And if you believe that he is Kyuubi, then you are complete idiots. Kana then stepped forward, her chikudo drawn as she entered a defensive stance, her eyes turning yellow, like those of a bird of prey, making the civilian members of the mob flinch in fear. Rest of the defenders also prepped themselves for a fight as they drew their weapons and prepped themselves for their hand seals. Those who wish to die, Kana announced, should try and kill my family. Those who wish to live, leave now. Don't listen to her. Fugaku shouted. She is a demon herself. She wishes to destroy Konoha from within. Fugaku shouted an angry Makoto as she stepped from the line of defenders, Sharingan blazing. Enough. Fugaku gritted his teeth in anger at his wife's defiance. What the hell do you think you're doing, Makoto? He growled, as Makoto narrowed her eyes at her arrogant husband. What I'm doing, dear husband, is preventing you from doing something stupid. Like killing my best friend's son. Makoto spat, as Fugaku seethed. Makoto, you dare defy me like this? Fugaku shouted angrily, go home now. Makoto spat towards him, like hell I will. Makoto replied, from here on out, we are divorced. Fugaku tem. Fugaku's eyes widened in fury at that as his now ex-wife stepped back, not risking to expose her back to him. Then your life is forfeit. And you are no longer a member of the Uchiha. I will make sure of that. He decreed, and Makoto just looked at him. Like I care about that, Makoto growled out, the Uchiha have become arrogant and corrupt, she declared, all the while making Fugaku more pissed as she continued, only reason you're doing this is because you want to be Hokage and that Minato was chosen over your limp. Murmurs and chuckles swept the crowd as Fugaku flushed in anger as he saw red. You whore. He roared, the Uchiha are the ones who deserve to rule Konoha. People of Konoha listened to him. Shiori shouted surprisingly, he would wish to weaken Konoha by killing off a Hokage that managed to defeat the Kyuubi. If he attacks, he would leave us vulnerable to another war with Iwa that we would not be able to win. Or have you already forgotten the Third Shinobi War? The crowd took that into consideration, as they remembered the lives lost during that war, which started when the Sandaime Cage of Suna mysteriously disappeared and enemy villages used this to their advantage when Suna's shinobi force were busy sweeping the countryside looking for their leader. After years of hard fighting, with Minato dealing the last finishing blow when he devastated Iwa's Shinboi force in decisive battles like the Battle of Kanobi Bridge with his Hiraishin Time Space Jutsu, thus earning him the moniker, Yellow Flash, and Minato being chosen by the Sandaime Hokage to be his successor as fourth Hokage. It was then the crowd realized that Minato did everything for Konoha, and they were being ungrateful for it. Fugaku, though, was livid. No, he roared angrily, the Uchiha are the ones destined to rule. Not some clanless orphan. Unknown to Fugaku, though, there was dissension in the Uchiha ranks as Itachi, a former student of Kushina's, had been moving through the crowd of Uchihas saying some pointed things that rung true to many of Fugaku's supporters. Having enough, Itachi stepped forward with a third of the clan behind him. Enough, father, Itachi said tonelessly as he gave a Sharingan-enhanced glare at his father as he and his own supporters stood beside Makoto. Go home and rethink your life. You dare defy me, Itachi? Fugaku growled as he shot back with a glare of his own. Itachi just looked at him with an apathetic look as he replied. I just did. That made Fugaku's blood boil. Then you are dead to me. You are no longer my son. And those that follow you are no longer part of the clan, he roared, and Itachi suddenly laughed loudly as it echoed throughout the area, surprising many that the emotionless Uchiha prodigy was displaying such laughter in public. You think I care about that, Tem? He asked humorously. I stopped thinking of you as a father when you forced me into becoming your own personal assassin, and the clan. Who gives a flying about a clan that is willing to betray their allies and throw the world into another war after the last one just finished? By now, Most of the civilians in the mob were starting to doubt Fugaku, and one by they started to break away and head back to their homes. Fugaku was now starting to see that the loss of his supporters, but still had the capacity to give a smug grin. It doesn't matter. I still have the civilian council and perhaps most of the village on my side. I will become Hokage, and the first thing I will do is kill that little abomination along with its parents. Shiori smirked secretly. You hear that, citizens of Konoha? She shouted, getting everyone's attention. All he wants is to kill the Yondaime, even after the Yondaime saved the village. By the way, Fugaku, where were the Uchiha during the attack? Fugaku paled at that, but quickly grew red in the face. We were busy trying to make sure our enemies didn't attack us while our forces were dealing with the Kyuubi, he countered, but Shiori didn't buy it one bit. Bullshit, she shouted back. The closest Iowa patrol was shaking in fear of the Kyuubi, and half of the Anbu were stationed on the borders to defend us during the attack, so Fugaku, what enemies needed slaying? Fugaku's face scrunched in anger at this. Shiori, you little bitch. You and your clan of wolves have always got in my way. Shiori didn't hear the rest because right now she was trembling in rage at the first sentence. Fugaku, she growled ferally, which unnerved everyone as they stepped away from the Okamika's matriarch. What was that you called me? You heard me, bitch, Fugaku snarled as he pulled out a kunai and charged at Shiori. His charge abruptly stopped when Shiori appeared in front of him, planting a fist in his gut and sending him flying into a building. So this is the almighty strength of the Uchiha? Shiori asked mockingly as Fugaku pulled himself out of the rubble. All I see is a pathetic thief. You slut. After I'm finished with you, I'll kill Minato, his bitch wife, and those two demons, starting with that brat. He screamed as he tried to charge her again, but didn't count on the fist that impacted with his face. I don't think so, asswipe, Kana growled as she strode forward, wisps of silver chakra dancing along her skin. You will never touch my family while I live. Suddenly she smirked. Besides, I doubt that the almighty Uchiha can deal with 3 pissed-off Jinchurikis. Everyone looked in confusion towards the smirking redhead, but before anyone could comment on what she said, screams and feline roars erupted at the back of the mob, and everyone turned and were scared shitless at seeing 2 Bengal tigers with their claws and teeth sinking into 2 of Fugaku's shinobi, while 5 more tigers came down the street, growling at the mob. What the hell? Shouted a frightened civilian as the big cats stalked toward them. A deep growl froze them in place as a massive green-scaled Chinese dragon landed behind them, saliva dripping out of its mouth and pooling on the ground. Glad to see you two are on time, Kana said, smiling as 2 figures landed beside her and straightened. Of course we are last, Tetsu confirmed, smirking as he drew out his katana and wakizashi. The hero always arrives precisely when he means to, don't you know? Reimei sighed at her fellow Jinchuruki's antics. Yep, what he said, she said, but then her face turned to that of concern. Where's Magoaki-kun? Kana turned to her friend and motioned with her head toward the hospital. Reimei nodded in understanding and then whistled to her tiger summons, who came to her side immediately. Stay here with Tetsu-kun and Kana-chan, I'm going to check on Magoaki-kun, she ordered, and one of the tigers nodded in understanding as Reimei turned around and headed into the hospital. So who is the one who got you in such a huff, Kana-chan? Tetsu asked, turning serious as the Asian dragon circled itself around the area, glaring balefully down onto the crowd. Kana jerked her thumb to Fugaku, who looked like he was torn between having an apoplectic fit and pissing his pants in fear. Tetsu-kun, meet Fugaku Uchiha, she said, grinning as Tetsu turned his gaze onto Fugaku, the award winner for wishing to slaughter those who can't even defend themselves. If Fugaku was not frightened before, then he sure damn was now, as green and black chakra wisp around the samurai Jinchuriki as said spirit vessel looked at the power-hungry Uchiha with a sadistic gleam in his eyes. Is that right? It wasn't a question, then I best do something about then, said the samurai as he marched toward the soon-to-be ex-patriarch of the Uchiha. With Reimei inside Konoha Hospital, this time with a very agitated person approaching the VIP hospital room, the Anbu didn't try and stop her, although it may have been the with me and you will never be able to have children. Look on her face, and it may even have been the amber-colored chakra emanating from her as she stalked towards the room. Mostly though, it was a warning from Magoaki to not stop her that kept them from doing so. As she approached the VIP room, the gathered Anbu had one combined thought at what they saw. She's scary. As Reimei entered the room, she looked around until her eyes landed on Magoaki, and she couldn't help but let out a gasp in shock and tears pooling in her eyes. Magoaki-kun, she whispered weakly as he grinned weakly up at her. Hey, Reimei-chan, he greeted before going into a coughing fit, how are you? A few tears slipped from Reimei's cheeks as she shook her head before sobbing out and hugged her lover. How do you think, Baka? She asked, sobbing against him. I get word you're dying and come rushing only to find a mob outside the hospital demanding your blood, and you ask me how I'm doing. Magoaki winced inside knowing his lover was not in the mood for jokes right now. I'm sorry, at least you're here now, he said as he embraced his tigress. Reimei could only sob into his shoulder. Minato and Kushina, who the latter was now holding Naruto again, looked at the scene and felt their hearts twist. If that were to happen to Minato-kun, I would be devastated. Kushina thought somberly as Minato held her tightly, a sign he was thinking the exact same thing. We're sorry for you, Reimei-san, Minato said apologetically. If you need anything, do not be afraid to ask us. Reimei turned to the blonde Hokage and the Uzumaki, a thought coming into her mind of what she and Magoaki desired the most. Looking at Magoaki and said Yuki Nin knew what it was she wanted, and thus nodded his consent. Yes, there's one thing, she said as Minato and Kushina listened in, we only desired one thing, a child. Minato nodded. I'll get in contact with the local orphanages as soon as the little problem outside has finished up, he promised, although I think there might be one who you can take in, not certain though. Reimei smiled gratefully at the Hokage and hugged Magoaki again as she buried her face into his neck. Just make sure it's a baby girl, we always talked of having a baby girl, said Magoaki as he rubbed Reimei's back while said Kunoichi nodded. Minato nodded and said he'll do what he could to find one. He immediately began thinking of what would have happened if it was he or Kushina who would be dead and Naruto would be alone, abused, neglected, ignored, and oppressed by the same people he swore to protect and die for, despite his final wish for him to be seen as a hero. It was then he promised himself that he will do everything for his son and any future children he and Kushina would have. Favoritism for the village be damned. Hokage-sama, a bare-masked Anbu said as he entered the room, I've come with a situational report about what is happening outside. The Uchihas have mostly surrendered now that Fugaku has been captured. He has been sent to Ibiki along with the Uchiha Elder Council. However, the remaining rebel Uchihas are receiving support from the Root faction. Shiori-sama is currently rooting them out and destroying any bases they find within the village. Minato nodded at that. Good. What about Fugaku's supporters from the village civilian council or the elders Danzo, Homura, and Kaharu? We managed to capture 3 of the civilian council, including Abi Haruno. The other councilors and the elders have not been caught yet, the Anbu reported, and Minato narrowed his eyes at that. If they were allowed to roam free, they will cause more unneeded chaos in the future. Have some messenger hawks ready to be sent to our outposts and to the fire daimyo. I don't want them to lie to him just so that they can have me ousted and take my son to be either executed or turned into a weapon, he instructed as the Anbu gave a shout of, hi, and left to carry out his orders. Minato sighed heavily as he sat on Kushina's bed and held her close to him, kissing her temple. Sometimes I just wish I could just take the 2 of you and leave, he said, maybe even leave the elemental countries altogether. Kushina nodded at that as she looked at her son, sleeping peacefully. Yes, I would welcome that, she said, then looked up at her husband and smiled. But, knowing those power-hungry morons, and Iwa, they'll be persistent in hunting us down, she said humorlessly, and Minato chuckled at that. Too true, he exclaimed as he looked down and smiled at his son, his and Kushina's treasure, for all time. Those rock-headed bastards better not try anything with Naruto though, if they do I'll summon Gamabunta over Iwagakure. Kushina smiled slightly. I doubt they will try anything soon, she replied, After all, they had heavy losses and are only starting to get back what they had lost. I doubt they're itching to lose another army to you anytime soon. Minato chuckled. It was true though, Iwa didn't have the manpower after losing so many shinobi in the war, and their Sandaime Tsuchikage, despite being a stubborn old, wasn't dumb enough to sacrifice more of his ninja for something as petty as killing the Yellow Flash's son for revenge. As he was thinking how to make sure nothing unfortunate happens to his son, Kana and Tetsu walk into the room with the rest of the Ha no Roku Tenshi, sans Hitomi. Well, that could have gone better, growled Shiori. What happened? Kushina asked in concern as she looked her friends and sister over. We dealt with the Uchihas easily enough once Tetsu-kun was finished with them, Kana explained, grinning up at the large man who shrugged, but then those root anbu started appearing everywhere along with other shinobi attacking multiple parts of the city. Everyone had split up while Kana and I started attacking known root locations, Shiori explained. Danzo had a massive underground complex under Konoha, it probably extends out of the walls as well. Minato was floored by that information. How the hell did he keep something like that a secret for so long, and right under mine and Hiruzen-sama's nose? He asked incredulously. It gets worse, Kana said with a solemn expression, and Kushina grew concerned. What is it, Imouto? Asked the new mother as Tetsu put an arm around Kana's shoulders as she took a deep breath. Apparently Danzo has been recruiting children into his root anbu, and not just orphans, and not just here in Konoha, Kana answered, her lips curling into a snarl as Tetsu placed a hand on her shoulder. What? Kushina asked as she felt the blood run from her face. Yoshino nodded in confirmation. We found children of all the major clans in Konoha, even some of the minor ones, she said. Not only that, but he has been abducting children from some of the clans in other countries. Minato cursed viciously. Damn it. This is going to be a massive shitstorm when this gets out. He growled. What the hell was that idiot thinking? This could very well cause another shinobi war. Which is precisely what he wants, Minato-kun. Everyone turned and found Hiruzen entering the room. Danzo will do whatever it takes to reach his goals no matter what the costs. Which is precisely why Tobirama-sensei named me his successor rather than Danzo, said the retired Hokage with a strained sigh at the end. But still, Tsume began, kidnapping children from all the major and minor clans in the elemental nations. That's just crazy. Not to mention all the experiment labs we found down there, growled Makoto. It smells of Orochimaru, that snake bastard. Minato, maybe we should inform the other nations, Hiruzen informed seriously, return their children to them and hunt down Danzo for his crimes. But will they believe that we didn't have anything to do with it though? Minato asked nervously. Iwa would not be happy. If we keep it from them and tell them later, they'll be more angry with us, Minato-kun. Kushina consoled as Minato sighed, thinking of what he has to do to avoid another war. After a few minutes of thinking, he made his decision. Shiori, Minato said, gaining Shiori's attention, prepare messenger hawks for the daimyos as well as the other cages, tell them that it is urgent, he ordered, and Shiori nodded in confirmation. At once, Hokage-sama, she replied and disappeared in a poof of smoke. Hopefully they'll believe us, Minato said, sighing as he sat back down. I just hope we can get our hands on them before they get out of Konoha. Makoto, what's the situation with the rest of the Uchihas? Those who were captured or surrendered are currently at T&I, Makoto reported. The ones who were not a part of the rebellion are currently restricted to the Uchiha compound under guard by Anbu. The ones who joined us are helping with rooting out Danzo and the other council members. Minato nodded at that. Good, and the civilians that were involved? He asked, and Tsume was the one who answered. The ones who backed out at the last moment are currently under house arrest, while the rest are being sent to the Anbu holding cells, Tsume reported, and Minato sighed. The civilians are always the first batch of people to be persuaded. The civilians who backed out are lucky that they are only getting a slap on the wrist, Minato groaned out. Unfortunately, we do need civilians, Yoshino said. After all, not many shinobi want to start farming and manning tills. Kushina giggled at the thought of Minato standing behind a grocery till with a fake smile plastered on his face. No, not many would be happy with it. She agreed. Everyone laughed at that, until a series of harsh coughing and a cry of, Magoaki-kun, caught their attention as they see said person coughing into his hand while Reime is trying to comfort him. Shit. Get sensei. Kushina yelled and Sum nodded and left to go find said medic while everyone else tried to help the dying man. Damn, guess I don't have as much time as I thought, Magoaki grunted as another coughing fit erupted. Damn it. Tsunade busted in with a worried look on her face as she went straight to Magoaki's side and began